Turns out, Jesus was a rebel who disobeyed several Old Testament laws and beliefs. This created problems at the time, and it can still be confusing. Here are a few of Jesus' radical acts and how Christianity responded. The Old Testament isn't too keen on the idea of drinking blood. In Genesis 9, God forbids eating anything that still has its lifeblood in its veins, and Leviticus and Deuteronomy also have prohibitions against eating or drinking blood. In fact, that's all Leviticus 17 is about, with God threatening to set himself against any blood drinker out there because the blood is the life. It's just a little strange then to have the central ritual of Christianity revolve around eating the flesh and drinking the blood of the Messiah. Whether the bread and wine used in Mass are symbolic or undergo transubstantiation is an ongoing argument among Christian denominations with a long history of controversy. Even some Catholic priests have admitted that defending the ritual and their belief in transubstantiation is a tall order. Jesus' declaration in Mark 7 that all foods are clean gets around the issue for some, but there are still prohibitions against blood drinking in the post-resurrection portions of the New Testament. The Catholics point to Jesus' words from John 6 for the answer, reading, "Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you." This is believed to supersede past injunctions and represent an aspect of positive divine law, that which can be changed by God. Jesus had a complicated relationship with the Pharisees, a legalistic sect of Judaism. At times, the Pharisees seemed friendly to Jesus, or at least respectful. They warned him of the threat from Herod, and some of them protected the early Christians after the resurrection. But in the Gospels, the Pharisees act as a recurring foil for Jesus, challenging his actions and accusing him of violating the law.
Look at these people! What have you done to help them?
We have taught them how to observe God's perfect law.
Jesus and the Pharisees clash multiple times over the Sabbath, specifically whether he breaks the law by healing on the holy day. He does this many times during religious observances, and these public miracles were heavily criticized by the Pharisees and other hardliners at the time.
If he was supposed to be healed, God would have done it himself. Interesting point.
By the first century, the idea of the Sabbath had evolved from a day to rest from labor and offer worship to God to a rigidly enforced abstention from almost any activity at all, at least under the Pharisees' interpretation. To go about healing the sick on the Sabbath was, to them, a violation of religious law. But Jesus didn't see it that way, and he let the Pharisees know that in a variety of ways. In Luke 13, he points out their unwillingness to see the sick healed, but when it came to taking their livestock to watering holes, they got a pass. Then in Mark 3, he poses a question of whether one should do good or evil. In other words, heal the sick or let them die on the Lord's day.
Your friend Elam has a withered hand.
Are you a healer? It is not lawful to heal on Sabbath.
And in case the message wasn't clear, he sums it up saying, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." Leprosy, or Hansen's disease as it's now known, is among the most notorious diseases in human history. In biblical times, people with leprosy were the unclean, outcast from society, isolated for fear of spreading the disease. People were so worried about catching leprosy, in fact, that half of Leviticus 14 is dedicated to rituals for the cleansing of lepers and others with skin diseases. And according to those instructions, only anointed priests can safely touch lepers to perform these rituals.
Don't come any closer.
It's okay, John. It's okay.
The term rabbi would have applied to Jesus in his day, but he wasn't an ordained priest. So his healing of lepers, as recounted in Matthew, Luke, and Mark, has been taken as a violation of religious law. Because of this, some argue he can't have been a divine presence. Yet Christians have argued that warnings about unclean lepers were meant to protect others from disease, not shame and degrade the afflicted. In this interpretation, Jesus worked around the letter of the law to fulfill its spirit by healing the sick. But throughout the Gospels, Jesus calls for his followers to obey God's laws without loopholes or ambiguities. Needless to say, this is at least a contradiction, if not outright rebellion. Among the prayers offered by Jewish men in the first century was, "Praise be God that he has not created me a woman." That should give you some idea of how patriarchal society was in Jesus' time. Women and girls were almost entirely reliant on their male relations. They had no rights to property or wealth, no legal means to remove themselves from a marriage for any reason, and were shut out of religious life. While there was no ironclad law against a man speaking to a woman without the supervision of her father or husband, it was seriously frowned upon. Jesus violates that taboo several times throughout the Gospels, which surprised even the women he interacted with. The Samaritan woman he asked for water in John 4 wonders why Jesus would even talk to her, considering she's both a woman and a foreigner. Even his disciples are surprised. In Luke 8, Jesus shows compassion to a woman who touches him to be healed without asking. And in Luke 13, after he's attacked for healing a woman on the Sabbath, he declares her a daughter of Abraham.
What are you saying?
You know what I'm saying.
This one's big. He's giving Jewish women equal status and respect along with the sons of Abraham, Jewish men. No surprise, that's one they had real trouble accepting.